So good morning, everyone, and good afternoon or good evening for our folks who are joining from across the pond. My name is Dan Sullivan. I am the head of partnerships at Cuseum. We make digital tools to help increase engagement and retention for the cultural space. So I'm going to be your host and moderator today. I first off just want to start by saying thank you for being here. For those who tuned into part one of this discussion, welcome back. And for those who are just joining for the first time, don't forget to check out part one. We can send a recording of that after this webinar as well. That's an important second component of this discussion. So as a starting point, please feel free, if you're watching, to introduce yourself using this chat functionality. We'd love to know who you are, where you're joining from. There's also a Q&A functionality on Zoom here. So what you can do is just ask a question, and there's a little thumbs up button. If you click on that, on a question that someone else has asked, it will drive the most engaging questions up towards the top, which will allow us to ask them and propose them to our panelists. So please feel free to use that if you've got questions, but also utilize the audience that's going to be watching here today using the chat. So again, thank you again for being here. We're going to have a great conversation today. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Lizzie Moriarty from Cultural Innovations.
Hi, everyone, and very pleased that we have such a strong panel today. So we're all looking at reopening, and we're looking at it from different perspectives. The most obvious one is how we manage visitors in our spaces, but then we start to look at other things that we do as museums that are slightly broader than that, and things start to get more complicated. So this panel is looking at what we used to do and how we did those other things and what we might have to do instead. So what do we do about public programming? What do we do about summer camps? How do we manage curatorial studentships and programs and internships? So what have we had to pause and rethink? What has changed? How can we adapt these things? And what are the long-term implications? So we've got a panel of 2 European and 2 US institutions. 2 are science centers and 2 are art museums. So I'd like to welcome our panel today. Michelle Antoine, it will kick off with her presentation, and then there'll be a Q&A after that. She's the Director of Exhibitions at Universcience, which is in Paris, as we've been talking about. And she's been very busy today because it's their first day of opening today. So congratulations. Looking forward to hearing how that went. Marcus Harshaw is next, and he is the Vice President of Learning and Facilities at Cuseum in North Carolina, and has been looking at how summer camps will run. So that's very interesting to see how different kinds of programming will work in these new circumstances. And then we have Felicia Mings from Art Institute of Chicago. She's the academic curator there and is really looking at what needs to be reworked with student curatorial programs and internships, and working with other art institutions across the world. And then finally, we have Naia Yakumaki, who is curator and head of curatorial studies at the Whitechapel Art Gallery in London. And again, she is looking at the curatorial student programs that they run with universities, and what that means when you bring a university into the mix and you have all of their COVID compliant things to think about. So without further ado, I will pass on to Charity and we can continue the discussion.
Thanks, Lizzie. I'm super excited about today's panel. I'm not going to talk very long other than to say welcome to all the AMM, Association of Midwest Museums members who are out there, and board members. Great to see you all here, and hope you enjoy the conversation. Thanks also to Cuseum and Dan for moderating and hosting today.
It is our pleasure. And oh yeah.
Oh, and Zinnia. I'd like to introduce Zinnia, my colleague from the Southeast.
Yes, hello, good morning, good evening, good day. I'm Zinnia Willis. I am the brand new executive director of the Southeastern Museums Conference, and we are so excited to partner on these really important webinars. And I'm so thankful to our speakers, and I know how much work it is to do a presentation in addition to everything else that you have going on. So really thank you for your time. And I'm so excited to see all the SEMC people here today and everybody. So that's it for me. Looking forward to a great presentation.
Awesome.
I'm gonna start getting the screen share going. Dan, you can.
Perfect. Yeah, so Cherry's going to share her screen, and we're going to go kind of around the different panelists, and they're going to give a quick introduction of themselves and some background. And so I'm going to hand the mic over to Michelle to begin that conversation.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like you to, I would like to ask you to excuse my English. Of course, it's not my native language, so I will make mistakes for sure. So I am director of exhibition at Universcience, and Universcience is a big institution with two venues, one in the north of Paris, one in the south of Paris, and we are welcoming around 3 million visitors a year. So it's quite a huge exhibition, a huge institution with a great surface for exhibition. In the La Cité, we have around 300 square feet. 300,000 square feet. We are speaking about square meters, so I need to make the conversation. And in the Palais, we have around 70,000 square feet. So quite big. You can see on the right, it looks like an airport more than anything else. And we have a library, we have Fab Labs, we have a Congress Center. So it's a huge boat. And on March 13, we had to close at 4 o'clock. It was a big boat to stop. And then we worked during the lockdown, and we heard on the 28th of May that we were officially authorized to reopen on the 2nd of June. Of course, not possible. And of course, we had anticipated a bit this thing. And in this very short delay, we adapted the exhibition. I want to explain shortly what we did in adapting the exhibition. Of course, our approach evolved. At the beginning, we were extremely cautious, and then seeing what happened in other fields, we realized that we could be more open and to understand that we had an obligation of, I don't know if it is a good translation in English, but not of results. So we had to give to the visitor the possibility to be safe and not doing everything for the visitor. So we were extremely pragmatic and having two things in mind. We have to allow distanciation. So reduce contact between the visitors and the object, and distanciation between people. And we had to give the people the opportunity to wash their hands as often as they could. So first principle, we are responsible together. So we share the responsibility with the visitor, and they do things, we do things, we give them the possibility to be safe. So first of all, reduced capacity. We have very low capacity in exhibition. We reduced to 1/5 in the City of Children, which is one of our main offer, and 1/3 in other exhibition, which means a big reduction. We have in the children, City Children, we have sessions, so they visit during a time slot very defined, and then between each time slot, there is an in-depth cleaning of the City of Children. So when I talk about in-depth cleaning, it's really disinfection of every object. But that means that they can manipulate. So what we decided, it was to allow interactivity and to allow this by giving cleaning procedure, by giving the gel everywhere in the exhibition. We rented 82 gel provider, so there are this kind of things everywhere in the space, and so that they can have the same kind of experience than they had before. We also regulate the flow of visitor by using the idea that the visitor is not alone in the exhibition, but is more in group, like a family group. We have this little drawing, and maybe in French it doesn't look the same. For us, we were talking about tribe in English, but for us it's really the question of family, but we can't talk about family, but it could be friends. So people are coming together, they are buying their ticket together, so they are visiting together. And so we are regulate the flow by using this entity instead of the individual visitor, which doesn't really exist in our museum. We also had, and you can see on the screen, a kind of intermediary object, a stylus, that we offer to the visitor at the beginning of the visit. They give it back by the end, and then they can use it on every screen, every button they meet in their visit, and they have the possibility to disinfect this object in many places in the museum. We also have defined one-way visits, I mean a one-way pathway in the exhibition, which is a revolution for a science center, where we are more in favor of kind of freedom in discovering the space. And we can show the next slide and last slide, because I want to be quite short so that I can have questions. You can see in our spaces, you can see the little visitor there. She's manipulating things, so we need to clean them. And they are used to go everywhere as they want. And so defining a path in the exhibition is really big constraints, and we hired additional people to help the visitor in this visit. And to end, of course, we have a lot of future exhibition in preparation. And so we are busy to develop new way of interacting with the exhibit, to put it on, using, for instance, Kinect, using sensitive carpet, using also all kind of sensors that can be used and activate without touching really. And I saw a question already on the screen. No. We ask, visitors have masks. It's mandatory above 11. But for children, we look at the schools, and they decided that it's not, it's too difficult for children to keep the mask, having a good experience in our space. So that's
awesome.
All.
Thank you for sharing, Michelle. And it's so, it's in so many ways, like others, you've got the cards stacked against you, and really an uphill battle around being such a hands-on nature, the hands-on nature of the subject matter. It's certainly going to be challenging. Thank you for sharing. I'm going to pass the microphone over to Marcus Harshaw to talk a little bit about what they're doing over in North Carolina.
Awesome. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. At least good morning stateside. Bonsoir on the European side. My name is Marcus, and I am, as I mentioned earlier, the Vice President for Learning and Facilities with Cuseum. The fun part about being a Vice President of both Learning and Facilities is I'm in charge of all of our camp and our engagement staff, and all of our cleaning staff, and all of our exhibit staff. So I really have a little bit of everything. And as it pertains to how we kind of rolled out some of our initiatives for COVID, I have not had a lot of sleep the past couple of months. I've been in museums for 15 years, primarily in programming and exhibition roles, and have a degree and teach in the Johns Hopkins Museum Studies program. Cuseum, more exciting. Cuseum is actually, we operate 2 museums. So we have 2 separate campuses that are about 10 miles apart from each other. We operate what is the former Children's Museum of Winston-Salem and SciWorks, so the former Science Museum of Winston-Salem. The 2 museums merged in 2016, and we have just actually torn down a building that's on a site for us to build a brand new building that will physically merge the 2 campuses in 2023. So safety, though, as you'll hear from a lot of the panelists, is really kind of our first quality standard. Safety is what is most important. So as we were thinking about how we were going to operate this summer, we always had safety in mind. We closed both of our museums at the close of business on Saturday, March 14th. And as we got through the end of March and all of April and the beginning of May, it was more apparent to us that we were not going to be able to open our museums to the public at the same time that we were going to be ready to reopen our museums for summer camp. So in particular, what we had learned, at least here in North Carolina, and I know several states, actually, we all started to follow the CDC, Center for Disease Control guidelines, specifically around how daycares were operating. And what we did is we looked at those guidelines along with some data that we had gathered through a survey to our community. Now, usually I put out a survey, I get 40, 50, maybe 80 responses. We put out a survey right at the end of April, beginning of May, and we asked really two groups of specific questions. Group one was, how do you feel about returning to the museum in the age of COVID-19? And group two was, how do you feel about sending your child to a summer camp at the museum? So again, usually I would see 100 responses and I would be in heaven. We had over 800 responses. And I surmised that everyone had nothing better to do during that time than to answer my survey. That's very true. So we looked at those results and we looked at those results, we looked at the CDC's guidelines and we said, okay, we can definitely open for camp in a way that's going to be safe, but we need to wait on how and if we're going to be able to open to the public. We also looked at our financial models. Now, the practicality of all of us is there is some financial burden to all of what we do. So we had to make sure that we're being fiscally responsible. So we looked at how do we slim our, is there a way to have a slimmer staffing model? And is there a way to make summer camp more efficient? And the answers to both of those questions was we could not support opening both of our campuses. And that meant, even though we had been taking summer camp registrations since middle of January for both of our campuses, in May we had to actually shift all of our programmatic elements of summer camp from our Children's Museum campus, which has about 26,000 square feet, to our Science Center campus, which has about 59,000 square feet. So that gave us obviously a whole lot more space to deal with. So we could definitely promote some level of distancing between our camp groups. It allowed us to focus our slimmer staff in one of our campuses. And so we looked, some of the big kind of keys that led us to some of this also was we asked two really specific questions that helped. One was only 22% of the survey respondents were likely or very likely to still send their kids to summer camp. Now, we saw that when we decided to make the move to our North Campus and said, that's about what our campus could support, given we want to reduce the number of campers that we have in each of the classrooms. So we were comfortable knowing that we would probably only see about 25% of our normal camp attendance. The second thing, and I talked to several colleagues here, both a lot of my current colleagues here at SEMC and a lot of my former colleagues in Midwest museums about digital or some sort of online camp offering. This is my favorite question. 69% of survey respondents told us they had no stomach for online or digital camp. Parents, and we did ask parents kind of to explain why, and overwhelmingly parents here in Winston-Salem that said that they had already spent so much time with their kids online in school, they did not want to continue that during the summer. So we felt good going into early June to be able to offer camps in a way that was going to be safe and that was going to be somewhat efficient and at least support our revenue goals at some point. And camps have held strong. Now, again, like I said, we've been taking camp registration since middle of January. We've had really, it's been a tale of two, a tale of two grown-ups. We've given about $30,000 in refunds because we've relaxed our refund policy. We've understood that some parents, some adults just didn't feel comfortable sending their kids to camp every day. And we recognize that. We relaxed our policy. We've given out quite a few refunds. At the same time, the first day that we opened for camps on June 10th, a parent brought her children up, dropped them in. We checked the temperatures. She turned at them, waved, said, "Bye, you guys," and she literally skipped back to her car. She was so happy to finally get her kids out of the house. She was skipping back to her car. So it's been a little bit of everything. We are still selling camps out. So we have 4 different classes each week. Each class is a different age group, and we've sold out 7 of those so far. So again, it's a tale of two cities.
Oh, sorry about that. Lost control.
So I mentioned we're following Center for Disease Control guidelines. So we are staggering drop off and pickup. Specifically, what we decided was our camps day starts at 9 a.m. Our public open was also at 9 a.m. What we did was we flexed our public open back to 10 a.m. So our camp check-in was not going to have any of the general public or our members trying to come and visit at the same time. Our pickup is really at our main entrance, whereas our drop-off is actually at a separate entrance, since we weren't going to be able to keep our public away from the general public at that point. I think I said that backwards, but our pickup is at a separate entrance also. So awesome. We are limiting mixing of children. We're cleaning exhibit spaces as they kind of rotate throughout the building. And of course, hand washing, hand washing, hand washing. So we're excited to see what the changes look like. We're supposed to open to the public this Saturday. Fingers crossed if we get word that we're able to do that.
Fingers crossed. That's phenomenal. And thank you for sharing. It's an entirely new set of challenges that not very many people really have been faced with. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Felicia Mings, and she's at the Art Institute of Chicago, to have her talk a little bit about what they're doing over there.
Hi, everyone. In case you haven't been to the Art Institute before, I have this little video clip so you can see we are a large encyclopedic museum in the heart of downtown Chicago. Our collection is around 300,000 objects. We see just above 1.5 million visitors per year. You can go to the next slide, Charity. So my role at the museum is academic curator. So I'm actually in a very small department that's not part of our education department, which was what people tend to think, but it's separate. And we do a lot of grant initiatives, curatorial training, and projects that are thinking through equity. And I co-curate exhibitions. So in thinking about reopening, I'm going to kind of first just talk a little bit about the challenges we've seen, particularly with our exhibitions, one I've worked on, as well as our curatorial training. So Mlangatana Mozambique Modern is an exhibition that we were installing. It was supposed to open March 21st. It's been 2 years in the making. I've co-curated it with 2 colleagues. One is the chair of our African art department and another in contemporary. And so this was really a massive show in that it was the first kind of major museum show of Mlangatana Ngwenya, who is a modern artist from Mozambique. This would have been the first show of his since his passing in 2011. And we have this series on modernism. And so the first two iterations where our leadership brought together curators across different departments to look at collections, really looked at European and American modern art. And so in this third iteration, my colleagues and I decided to kind of venture a little further. And so that's how we came to focus on Mulongatana and thinking about modernism in Mozambique and really his early years of his career. And so this became an international loan show, which is not how it originated. It was supposed to be a collection-based show. We have works from Mozambique, from Portugal, from institutions in the States as well. And so we were really installing this, and we were told that the museum was going to close. And so it closed on March 14th with many works from this show hanging on the walls, essentially. It was the following week, we were supposed to bring the Sons in and have programming for this exhibition. And so a lot of that, I mean, is on pause. We're fortunate to know that this exhibition, which was supposed to close on July 5th, will be extended till November 15th. And there's been a lot of kind of digital activity happening to promote our exhibitions, such as this and others. So the mayor has an initiative called Stay Home Hit Play, where she's visiting different cultural institutions. It's kind of like a virtual field trip for middle school or grade 7, grade 8. So I think that's middle school. And so they basically, the mayor goes and does these 30-minute segments, speaking with staff and learning about what they're doing to make their institutions safe for people to return. And so the Art Institute is featured in one of those episodes. And in that, we talked a little bit about this exhibition. We've had a lot of blog posts happening. Virtual tours are being developed. And of course, within our institution, our staff are really working on a multitude of committees to figure out how to make the museum safe. Museums are supposed to open in phase 4. And so we just entered phase 3 at the beginning of June. We're, I guess, on track to enter phase 4 as a city of Chicago at the end of June. I just received an email yesterday saying that our museum hopes to be in a point of readiness for reopening on July 30th, which doesn't mean we're reopening on that date, but more staff will be able to come in and do their work, such as conservators and others that need to be on site to do their activities. I want to move forward one slide. So one of the programs that I run is called the Andrew W. Mellon Summer Academy and Undergraduate Curatorial Fellowship Program. This initiative's been around since it started in 2014 with 5 partner institutions across the states: the LA County Museum of Art, the High Museum in Atlanta, Museum of Fine Arts Houston, the Nelson Atkins Museum in Kansas City, of course, the Art Institute. And then when we got our second wave of funding for another 5 years, the Philadelphia Museum of Art was added to this consortium. So this program really came about through the staff demographic report that the Mellon Foundation and the American Art Museum directors organized. And so it's really about supporting the next generation of students, primarily from underrepresented backgrounds, have a path forward toward museum careers. And so I have a little quick video clip in which the students, some of our former students, explain what this program looks like.
Oh, okay. Hi, my name is Yadi. I'm a second-year Andrew Mellon Curatorial Fellow here at the Art Institute.
My name is Alejandra Vargas.
Hi, my name is Margarita Liscano Hernandez.
Hi, I'm Sheridan Tucker.
Hi, my name is Jarvis Boylan.
My summer academy, I think, honestly changed my life.
The summer academy was a week-long intensive course.
And so you were working sometimes with curators, obviously, but also with conservation, with museum education.
And then following that week, 2 students from the 15 are selected to be 2-year curatorial fellows.
It's a lot more intimate. You have a mentor that you're meeting with every day on site.
When I don't know that I would have had the opportunities or the same outcome if I didn't have the Mellon Fellowship.
So I just want to quickly say, now that you got a quick glimpse of what the program looks like, this week-long intensive where I bring 15 freshmen and sophomore students together to live in residence and to do this intensive on-site program obviously couldn't happen this year. We're potentially postponing it till next year, but if there's no vaccine, we're not quite sure what that looks like. And if it needs to become an online program, what would that even consist of? I'm in weekly calls with our consortium of museum partners to figure out what this can be. And the fellows that currently have their fellowship, we wanted to kind of safeguard their economic security. So they have a full-time 10-week summer internship that is happening remotely. And our annual national convening that's hosted by a partner museum is now becoming a virtual convening. So those are some of the things that we're working through in terms of kind of curatorial training and students.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, and the videos are just great to give so much more perspective. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Naya Yakumaki, who's going to talk a little bit about what they're doing over in Whitechapel in the UK.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you for inviting me, Lizzie. So I am head of curatorial studies and a curator at the Whitechapel Gallery, but I also supervise the team that maintains the historical elements of the gallery, which is the archive team, an archivist and an assistant. I've been working at the Whitechapel Gallery for 20 years, so I have seen few changes, as you can imagine, including directors and major changes to the building, and now COVID, and the changes that will come from that. So just a little bit about the Whitechapel Gallery. It's a Kunsthalle type of institution without a collection. Here in the photograph, you can see on the left, the Whitechapel Gallery as it was founded in 1901. And on the right-hand side is the public library of the area, of the Whitechapel area. These two buildings merged in 2009, and we expanded our spaces. And so we are 119 years old. We're in East London, in the Whitechapel, as I said, a neighborhood which was extremely impoverished for decades, but very rich at the same time in demographics. So the nearest point to the ports of London, from the ports of London to the city, and numerous groups of migrants from the 18th century onwards, and still live in the area. The area, though, has been a hub for artists as well since the 1970s, and most recently from the 1990s onwards, a hub of galleries and project spaces. So I'm giving you our surroundings. So we are a very important pivot of that, in a way, network of galleries around us. We are free to the public. People can walk through our front doors. We only have one major show that is a paying show. So a lot of activities, programming exhibitions of contemporary art, commissioning new work to artists, but also an extensive community program that involves school visits, local groups visits, and general visitors. And thanks, we can stay on that slide for a minute because I'll get to it just in a second. Of course, the gallery is also very known for a fantastic, in a way, dynamic public program that with guest speakers from around the world and workshops. And you can imagine the huge changes to all of this program that I've just mentioned. The exhibitions, of course, had to be extended. So we closed on the 19th of March. Some shows had just opened, some were running already, but everything, we decided that everything will be extended until August. At the time, we felt that May was the time we were coming back to the offices. We were very optimistic, as so many other people were. So we had to extend twice with our lenders. But of course, apart from that extension, there were a couple of projects that are due to happen when we open in July, but we have realized that they cannot open simply. So one is that this project that you see now, the photograph, is Joy Moran's and Carlos Bunga performance, which is part of a major commission to Carlos Bunga, which you can see a little bit in the background. And this performance, of course, was stopped, but was rescheduled for August. Even though we will open in July, we felt the performance, the nature of that performance and the proximity of the dancers, the performance, but also the audience, it just makes it impossible to put up. At the same time, we had scheduled for August, again, Yoko Ono's 2001 Meant Peace for the World, which involves the interaction of the audience with numerous broken dishes and ceramics from around the world as a symbolic gesture. And so this was going to be installed in the Education Gallery, where a lot of children with their parents come. Again, although we open, we cannot have people handling the same pieces of ceramic again and again and being so close to each other. So this has to go from the program. John, a conference solo show due to install in October, can still be installed, of course, but the artist was commissioned to do a major film for that show in October, and the film production couldn't take place all of these months. So we decided to move the whole show to spring 2020. In the meantime, while these things were canceling or extending, we focused on digital platforms. So we shared a lot of artist films online, and we decided to weekly share a story from our archive. So an image and a story that was unknown to the public, sometimes behind the scenes. Apart from our programming of contemporary art, of course, we're committed to education, and we're a mentoring institution educating young curators. And so we were about to launch one major program and continue another. So we had just devised a fantastic MA in curating art and public program, which stands out from a lot of other similar ones because it has a focus also on public programming, but it involves an immersive placement at the Whitechapel Gallery, working in our offices, all the students, for about 4 months, and so becoming industry ready. Now this program, which we were hoped to launch in September, we have to defer to January 2021 for sure, maybe September 2021, we hope not, we hope it will be January. We are of course collaborating with a university who doesn't know exactly how to deliver their programs yet, but they have announced that everything will be delivered online for the first semester. Now you can imagine this is a new program in curating, has a lot of hands-on modules and theoretic, and the immersive placement is its unique selling point. Another program that we've been running successfully since 2012 is the Neon Curatorial Exchange, which involves an exchange, but a physical exchange of professionals, emerging professionals from 2 countries, the UK and Greece, and gives the ability not for these groups to network only, but very importantly to travel to each other's city. So they come to London and we go to Athens. And this is very important because the program is devised in such a way that it's a behind the scenes, it's a grassroots program. So every year we discover new spaces, we speak to new people. Sometimes we go into a basement, which we hardly fit in. And so it makes it hugely exciting. We cannot deliver that program now. It was due to take place in June. The travel, physical travel is the most important for us. Of course, we can change it to an online platform, but the fact that I've been running it since its inception, and I know that the most important conversations between the curators do take place after hours, and that's where the networks formulate. So we decided to move this to October. Traveling might still be, of course, restricted, so we may just have a one-off online event and then defer this exchange to 2021. I wanted to say here, you probably realize that we haven't opened yet, as many of you have, but today our Prime Minister announced that from the 4th of July we can open, so we have decided to open from the 14th of July onwards. Yesterday we had a large staff meeting where a lot of the practicalities that other people mentioned were discussed, but also concerns and worries about staff returning to the gallery. Some staff do not want to go into public transport, for instance, and we do have to listen to all of these voices. So just to tell you some practical things that were discussed yesterday, we have 2 kitchens for staff. The director said no use of kitchens, for instance. We have to do a staff survey to understand which members of our team of 72 people feel vulnerable, which are caring for vulnerable people, and basically who wants and who doesn't want to come back to the office. We have cancelled all the public program until December 2020, this is for sure. We are going to allow only 15 people at a time in the gallery. Everyone who comes into the gallery for anything has to book a time, has to book a slot. There will be, of course, a one-way system and the 2-meter distancing, although today it was cut down to 1. Front of house staff will wear masks and face protectors, but then we have staff who are deaf. And they said, if we wear masks and the visitors wear masks, how can we communicate with them? So we have to consider all of these things that will actually affect access as well. We would have to, from now on, risk assess every single visitor who comes to work with us, a contractor, a technician, any handler, art handler. And of course, we have to train them to our new systems. So it's going to be quite different. I don't have concrete examples yet because we are about to put them in place. But I wanted to tell you that only front of house staff have to come back. What was the outcome of the meeting yesterday? And only exhibition staff who are installing have to go back at particular points in time. Otherwise, we have to make sure that the less people work in the offices as possible. And so we will have very flexible working hours.
For sure. Yeah, it makes sense having that staggered approach. And what we're seeing here, Charity, is showing an image of the stylus that a few folks had mentioned. Michelle had mentioned that they're utilizing this, and they actually sterilize them and reuse them. Some people have disposable styluses, but just wanted to give you all, just a quick visual of what those look like. So we've got a number of different questions, and if any of you have questions, you can feel free to ask them in the Q&A, and some of our panelists will jump in there, and then we can also talk through them a bit as well. So the first thing that I think I'm really wondering is, on this road to reopening, and I'd love to hear from the different panelists, what roadblocks have you encountered in regards to exhibitions or programs, either in planning or kind of as you've gone about the reopening process? So Felicia, do you want to start us off with this one?
I think our museum is, I mean, we're not quite at the reopening phase, so it's a hard question to answer. And although we have committees, I think there's about 6 different reopening committees that encapsulate staff from a variety of departments. I'm not currently on one of those. So we have an all-staff meeting this afternoon, and I know we had a board meeting yesterday. So I think updates will be coming to us really soon. But all we know really is that, our protection services team, housekeeping, they've maintained time on site this whole closure, and that will slowly move toward having staff kind of on site, like others had mentioned, to just do essential things like get exhibitions installed or conservation and cleaning. A lot of us curators and other staff that can do their work at home will continue to do their work at home kind of indefinitely is what it looks like. And we've suspended all internships and fellowships until January of 2021. Except for the Mellon undergraduates that I mentioned and a few other kind of Mellon graduate fellowships or postdoctoral ones, things that are connected to restricted funds where they need to kind of continue. And so it's really been about rethinking, how do you do these things at a distance? I noticed in the chat someone asked about how you maintain and manage internships from a distance, and it's, a lot like class in some ways, with Zoom meetings kind of weekly with guest speakers, having really clear defined assignments, check-in times, and also just encouraging the students to know that they can work at their own pace, that if you want to go for a run in the middle of the day, I'm totally fine with it. Just make sure you make it to your department meeting. So really just being flexible and recognizing, especially my students are all students of color. So on top of COVID and having a lot of their families disproportionately affected by it, they're also greatly impacted by all the kind of social injustice happening. So trying to make sure that they're feeling okay in terms of a mental health point of view, and then also once we establish that, helping them to deliver on their work is really what my focus has been.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you for sharing. It's certainly been a distressing time. So I want to send it over to Marcus for a moment. Obviously, Marcus, you're in a slightly different position where you're kind of reopened on the summer camp side. Your facilities haven't entirely reopened. Can you talk a little bit about some of those roadblocks that you've run into kind of throughout this process?
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, the biggest roadblock we run into is state and local government. Because actually at the beginning of this COVID, so right about mid-March, the city government, the county government, and the state government all had different stay-at-home orders. And so we were just kind of playing with, all right, well, which one is the one that is the longest, or which the one that we need to be paying attention to the most. And then the state put out their the actual closure orders, but didn't mention museums, but the county order mentioned museums. So there was, here specifically in North Carolina, there was a lot of just general confusion from our government leaders as to what was going on and how we could or could not operate. So as we fast forward to 2 days from now, Governor Cooper is making a decision on whether or not North Carolina can move on to either phase 2.75 or phase 3 this Saturday. And when he last spoke, this Saturday would be a move to phase 3, but as luck would have it, or terrible luck, a lot of the Southeast is dealing with rising COVID cases. And so we're just kind of waiting until Thursday, 2 o'clock Eastern, so to see whether the governor is going to allow us to reopen or not.
Yeah, for sure. It's difficult and obviously uncertain. You never really know what you're going to hear. So you can do all the planning you want, but until you get the green light, it doesn't necessarily matter. So Naya, how about on your side? What are you facing as far as kind of roadblocks, and how have you navigated around those throughout this process of reopening?
Of course, there are similar issues that both Alicia and Marcus in a way have mentioned, but I think for us is a major roadblock is actually was the decision to change the ethos of a program or carry it on for the sake of carrying it on. So for instance, the non-curatorial exchange, which is very close to my heart, can go on in October. I can program everything online. I can invite people from around the world to present, but it's going to fundamentally change it. And the success of that program was truly that grassroots element it had. So this is something that makes me think that we should definitely lose it from 2020, which might have a financial impact because it has a sponsor attached to it, but also the sponsor says, I don't want my name attached to something that may put people at risk if they have to travel. So there's problems like that we do have to weigh. Also, we haven't opened yet, so we haven't encountered the issues as such. Also, launching an MA, which is a huge financial investment, but also we're expecting it to be a huge success when students and parents are actually very, very hesitant now in traveling abroad and coming to London especially, which had a very high number of cases. And so that doesn't mean that it's not going to happen because it's all planned to open in January, but we cannot have the forecast that we were able to have, the financial forecast to say, hang on, we need a few more students, we're going to delay it. It's the unpredictability of it all that I think is our major roadblock. There is a positive though as well. We have more lead time to plan and program certain projects that we have decided can go in the back burner and promote them at the same time. So this is a positive, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think one thing a lot of organizations are thinking about is, well, we have a hands-on nature of things, so how do we structure things a little bit differently? So Marcus, can you talk a little bit about, obviously with the summer camp and the hands-on nature of the museum, how do you structure those activities differently, taking all of these kind of safety precautions into account?
Sure. Yeah. So the first thing is, since we have fewer campers in each of the classrooms, we're able to at least promote some level of social distancing within the classrooms. We're able to actually, a lot of our summer camp programs they're all very kind of craft and project based. So we're able to keep kids safe. We're able to keep a small number of craft supplies on hand that we clean and sanitize regularly, as well as some of the museum props. Now, as those camp groups go out to the museum floor, what we've instituted is, it's really been more about communicating between the camp groups. Hey, I've got my group in this exhibit. Okay, well then we'll take our group outside instead. And so the camp counselors are really good at kind of moving the kids around the building. The camp groups themselves are social distanced between themselves. And then when they're completed, they're doing a great job of calling the facilities team and saying, all right, we just finished in the Mountains to Sea exhibit, so it needs sanitized. And no one's gonna be in there for the next hour. And then they go in and do that. So really it takes a lot of communication to make the machine work.
Yeah, communication is really the key in so much of this. And Michelle actually, she had to jump off, but she talked a little bit about keeping visitors in certain groups. So kind of keeping them segmented, if you will, creating more linear experiences, providing more opportunities for hand sanitizing stations, utilizing those styluses, which are then disinfected, and then making sure to clean between visitor interactions. So very similar to what you're sharing there, Marcus. And Felicia, do you want to talk a little bit about kind of on your side, with these fellowship programs and your collaborations and your partners, what do they think about these long-term implications of the pandemic, for one thing, but also, how is that going to impact the program in the field overall?
A great question. I think so. Initially with the pandemic, one of the big challenges is we're all in different states. And so since there's no great leadership at the federal level coordinating anything, some people had planned for their summer academies to happen. We plan according to the school schedules surrounding us because we mainly take in students from nearby. And so some people were planning to go forward and we're maybe going to do it in August. So I think those initial challenges just around working together to have a similar program and a similar kind of communications to the students that we've kind of accepted, yet knowing that we have very different constraints where we are, is something that's affected us right now in planning, but also is something that's going to challenge us going forward. And I think for the field at large, a big thing that I've been thinking about is our institution had a Ford and Walton Family Foundation grant. And that was a large diversifying art museum leadership initiative where 20 institutions, I believe, across the states received this funding. This really follows on the heels of the Mellon undergraduate program, which is all about diversifying the field. But what I tend to see is a lot of times this diversity is happening at the kind of intern, fellowship, coordinator level, and it's not making change at the kind of leadership level. And so as you see, layoffs and, needing to rescind positions of like research assistants or of internships being paused, I wonder when we go back to our institutions, has this work around diversity over the last 5 years or so, is it going to be all for naught? Are we going to see that there isn't real kind of impact because a lot of those young people that have been moving toward these fields simply won't have positions? I'd love other people's thoughts on that too, especially in Europe, what that looks like, and if there is a similar push within museums that are not just art museums, but I mean, this is a lot been around curatorial and conservation and these kind of leadership fields within the arts, but I imagine within the sciences and other museum fields, there's a similar struggle for diverse people to kind of enter.
For sure. Naya, do you want to throw anything in there?
No, I mean, I agree with the point Felicia made. Of course, this is a huge concern for everyone, especially now that every institution is looking at its diversity strategies, is really realizing that change is essential. And so this is clashing at the same time with these roadblocks that we're facing. So I don't want to add anything, just maybe to say in how we are rethinking certain things. I think we all have to be innovative, and I think institutions have really shown that. It's not that we have to change everything to the digital, we just have to find new ways within that new tool So I can give a very brief example. In the autumn, instead of holding an open day for this MA that was going to be pivotal to its, communication, we decided to host an open session on network curating, which is something. And so that would be the launch also of the MA, because what we've seen in the last 5 months is everyone rediscovered, even if they were not connected to the digital, rediscovered networked curating. And so whether that was posting things online or just rethinking the physical space. And so we thought maybe this is something that doesn't evade reality, takes reality, but then moves it on and launches an interesting study, which may have to change itself.
For sure. So we've got about 4 minutes left, and what I want to hear is just from each of our panelists. You've all had such, different experiences throughout this process. Some words of wisdom, some words of inspiration. Naya, do you want to start us off with that? What would you say to anybody who's watching right now that would say, this is what I would do if I were you. This is what I want to impart on you.
Well, I think we just all have to realize, of course, the pandemic changed our lives, and as we emerge of it, the fear of potential second wave will make us more cautious with personal behavior, but also our ambitions as institutions. But I want to take this as an opportunity to look again, perhaps, at our locality and discover diversity in also what is near us, because that is a challenge. The art world was made up by jet setters who translated diversity by just switching geographies and bringing artists in that they've never met before because they were from a certain geography. But if we look closer, I think we can achieve a diversity that is actually essential in our local. And so, yeah, something.
Phenomenal. Thank you for sharing. And Felicia.
I love what Naya said. I don't know what to add. I think it's so important to look and to kind of partner and dig into our local community, as she said. And I think the opportunity that's come out of this in some ways is the ability to work differently, right? So I encourage institutions to, if people can work remotely, if there's abilities to rethink, opportunities for childcare and things like that people kind of felt really restricted within. I think this moment has forced us to rethink how we work and where we can get work done. And I think there's advantages in some of that. And so I hope institutions will see what's working and how it works for their employees and to really try to push that forward into policies that can make a lasting difference for how we interact.
Absolutely. And Marcus, can you share some words?
Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. We're all going through this and we're all kind of borrowing ideas from each other. Some of the ideas are going to work for your organization, some of them aren't, but just keep pushing forward, keep doing the thing, and we will all get through this.
Absolutely. I think that's been the biggest, the biggest component of all this is just, strength in the face of adversity. And, sometimes you just have to lean into it and grit through it. So as always, phenomenal insights from our panelists today. And just want to say thank you to everyone, and thank you to Charity, Zinnia, and Lizzie for allowing me to moderate today. I'm going to pass the mic over to Charity, who has a few closing words as well.
Yes, and I just want to acknowledge that Michelle offered her words of wisdom. This crisis is an opportunity. It pushes us to innovate in terms of design and organization. So I think this is good. I was in we had a brainstorm webinar recently, and we were talking about the idea that this is sort of the golden age for do-it-yourself creativity. So let's all embrace it. I just want to say a quick thank you again to all of our panelists and our moderator, Dan. This has been very interesting. Great to hear from all of you. And to all of our participants out there, thank you for being here. And just know that we'll be following up with you directly with the recording from today, as well as any resources beyond the slides you saw today that our panelists wish to share. We'll put together kind of a Dropbox. It'll be combined with resources from a previous session in the series, so you'll get to see all of them. and have access to that. So hopefully that's helpful, and good luck with your reopening plans.
Good luck, everyone. Thank you all.
Good luck today, Michelle.
Thanks, Charity. Thanks, Michelle, Antoine. Thanks, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye.